Hello everyone, Masculine Entertainment's here.
And Mama Entertainments. Welcome to our podcast.
Today we're going to be discussing 4 special animated biblical films and a series.
There's many different movies and shows that teach lessons through biblical stories, each with their own spin on the stories and delivering the messages. We have Jonah, a VeggieTales movie, Ben-Hur, the animated movie,
The Miracle Maker, and Superbook, a currently airing series on CBN.
Yes. So we have some, and hopefully at least one of these you're familiar with. We bet that a lot of you are familiar with Jonah, the VeggieTales movie.
Right, because that movie was out in like very early 2000s. Mm-hmm. So this is like when there were very little kids going to see it.
Yes, like you. So the first one we're going to give an honorable mention to is the Ben-Hur animated movie.
And I almost forgot about this movie. I'm more familiar with the live action one, as a lot of people are. And it's much longer than this one, if I remember correctly.
The live action movie is a little over 3 hours, yes. But I think what was really great about this version are 2 things that stand out for me. One is they used the same actress, Charlton Heston, who played Judah Ben-Hur in the movie, mm-hmm. and to voice the character in the animated series. So that was really awesome. And then the second thing is that they condensed it to an hour. So the main points of the movie, mm-hmm. that convey the story of Jesus and how this man's life, which is, I'm told, is supposed to be fictional, interplays with his crossing the paths of Jesus, mm-hmm. During the time he was here on earth. I love it. I think it's great. Animation is really good too. It's 2D, but it's really good, high quality, bright colors, clear animation.
And that's really saying something, because at the time people said, oh, animation's kind of meh, even for CGI and stuff. But that's really a step up for this movie that seemed to be more like ahead of its time, mm-hmm. in terms of the 2D animation and being very fluid and action-packed when the time came.
Right. Now, if you don't have this movie or you've never seen it, it's available on Amazon. The last time I saw it, it was $9. We got it actually on a deal for $5 a few years ago. Mm-hmm. But it's worth it if you love stories about biblical stories that entertain and teach. Mm-hmm. If you have younger brothers and sisters, or you have younger children, or you just like watching animated movies that have a message and that are positive, then the Ben-Hur animated movie is one you'll want to pick up or try to see during the holiday season. Sometimes they air, I know the movie on PBS, but they may air it, during that time as well.
Right. All right, so then we move on to the movie, right? What we want to talk about first? Jonah?
Of course you want to talk about Jonah first.
Now, I remember, of course, I know both of us remember this movie, and I first saw this movie when I was like, how old?
Oh my gosh, you were under 5.
And I still remember the movie. Usually at that point, it's like, what happened there?
It's 2000. It came out in 2003? 2003. Yeah, you were really little. And how we got to Jonah the VeggieTales movie, but we didn't see this movie for many years until after it come out.
Yeah, we just heard about it in being in theaters.
Right, but we were led to this movie by Where's God When I'm Scared? And that was your first VeggieTales movie where Junior Asparagus was afraid of
It was like a Frankenstein celery monster.
Right, Frankencelery. And they had the cutest little song, and still to this day, we go around singing the song. But that was our introduction to Jonah the VeggieTales movie. Now, this movie itself was a landmark in animation, because not only was it a full-length hour...
It was over an hour
movie. The animation was great, and they took one of the better-known biblical stories, and they put such a great spin on it, making it entertainment and teaching the lessons they need to teach, right, with great music.
And if you know VeggieTales, their models always have Sunday morning value and Saturday morning fun. Mm-hmm. And what VeggieTales used to do during the time when they made the Jonah movies, that they would have the characters play biblical characters. It would just be played by a bunch of vegetables. Mm-hmm. And then they would have fun little twist on them, or Saturday morning twist on them. So for the Jonah movie, it's still Jonah's kind of hoity-toity in here, right. And when he tries to leave. He's on a pirate ship, and Nineveh's a bunch of fish slappers.
And another difference for this is in all of the other movies, you had Bob the Tomato. No, Bob the Cucumber. And
you had it right.
Bob the Tomato and Bill the Cucumber.
Larry, good
Larry,
grief.
duh. Bob the Tomato and Larry the Cucumber. And they were the ones who would lead all the other stories. But in this one, they took a whole different character and made him the lead.
Right, and he was usually a secondary character or played some other one in a story. And I heard originally Bob was supposed to be Jonah.
I'm glad they changed it.
And then they changed it to Archibald.
Archibald Asparagus! Yes. And it was a good move because it was really, really good. It was fun from the beginning with the first song, and the songs always keep you entertained when you watch a VeggieTales movie.
And it was just really fun, and it's so memorable because to this day, movie came out when I was less than 5. Probably saw it when I was 5, right?
Yes.
Yeah, saw it when I was 5, and usually, at that point, you're like, what happened at that point later in life? But the movie is so memorable. I still remember the movie and the songs and watching it. And I watched the movie quite a few times when I was little.
And not embarrassed, we still watch it now. We'll pull it out every now and then and still watch the movie from beginning and enjoying it.
Right, and I can understand some of the older VeggieTales stuff because some of the stuff looks like it's targeted specifically for little kids with some of the humor or the dialogue.
Right.
But with Jonah, it was for families,
right.
And it didn't dumb down the story of Jonah. It kept the whole thing, even the lesson at the end with Jonah not learning anything and being the twist. You usually care to learn something, but in here he doesn't learn anything. You have to learn the lesson,
which is not a spoiler because it's the exact same thing that happens in the Bible,
right?
But the way it was done was just so fresh and new. And as you mentioned, it was geared toward families. They had some big acts like Newsboys is a very big,
I guess a big group.
I don't know if you would call them gospel but they sing lots of music that have to do with the Bible and Christian values. And they had another choir, and I can't remember the name of the choir.
It was the ones that sang "God's a God, Second Chances." I think it was the Revivals. I believe it was the Revivals.
But it was an actual choir. And the songs were really catchy, really good. You'll find yourself singing along with them without, knowing it.
Right.
But the best song, as you mentioned, it's called Second Chances.
Right.
And you can see these asparagus and choir robes and
they're singing.
Shades. And they're singing kind of like in the Blues Brothers type song. And they're just telling Jonah about second chances because he doesn't think that the people of Nineveh should be shown mercy. He thinks they should all be destroyed because of their wickedness. But God says otherwise for various reasons. And they sing this song, and I love this song. This is actually one of my favorite songs, even though it's to this kid's movie. And I go around and sing it sometimes with no embarrassment.
Yeah, and it's just like I said, it's just a really fun movie, whether you're a little kid, bigger kid, or full-grown adult. Every time you watch the movie, even watch it multiple times, it's just really fun. It's entertaining. It gets the story right, even with all the Saturday morning twists in it. And it was literally, like you said, not only landmark animation, but also I think the best project of Big Idea, which was the company that made Jonah. And this was their first movie. As you know, they did have another movie called Paws That Don't Do Anything, which they were on spinoff, but unfortunately...
It didn't do anything.
Yeah, literally. It wasn't near the success as Jonah.
Right.
I think the problem was it didn't have a biblical lesson like Jonah. It just had be yourself, which you can get from the Lego movie. Right. You could get from a ton of movies and shows the same message without it being VeggieTales related. And unfortunately, this was the start of VeggieTales...
downfall.
Yeah, downfall.
Yeah.
with the stories being more silly than educational, and started doing movie parodies like Indiana Jones, Lord of the Rings, Saturday Night Fever, Justice League, and then it stopped being the lesson that you learn in the Bible, and they start getting stars like Justin Timberlake in it.
And there's nothing wrong with that, but when you have cornered a target market audience for over a decade by that time,
right,
and you had this, people knew, as you said, Sunday morning value, Saturday morning fun.
Right.
You knew when you bought any VeggieTales merchandise, DVDs. Back then they still had tapes, coloring books, whatever it was.
Yeah, and they were
you knew what you were getting for your kids or for yourself or for your nieces and nephews and whomever. But when you take after your most successful movie, and this movie was very successful, it made a ton of money.
Yeah.
And you decide you're going to change your target audience.
Yeah, immediately after.
And I think, possibly it was they thought they would make more money by doing it. But again, you lost your target audience. You had millions of people who were regular users and consumers of your merchandise and buyers of your product. And you kind of alienated them. And so I think, personally, that's why they failed.
Right.
And they couldn't draw you back in because, as you said, movie after movie after that just didn't have
the same feel
and the spark that the others had. I mean, they just lost it. Now, we do want to mention that we're mentioning these movies because this week, well, by the time you hear this Saturday, Passover will have been on the 30th, and Resurrection Day, Easter, whatever religious holiday you celebrate, will be on Sunday. So these are just some recommendations and thoughts for you to watch, and again to share with your children, or just watch yourself, or share with nieces and nephews, younger brothers and sisters. So these are just some suggestions on ones that we have found highly entertaining and love to share with you during this special time of the year.
Right. And whether or not you watch VeggieTales, and if you haven't watched this movie, we really recommend it. Yes, it's a little kids movie, but it's a family movie altogether, and anyone can watch it and enjoy it and see one of Big Idea's best work ever.
And there's some great humor in it that is not targeted toward little children. There's something for everyone. As you said, it's a family movie. So I wouldn't say it's a children's movie, it's a family's movie. But you watch it as a child. I watched it with you when you were a child, and I've watched it as an adult, and you're still watching it as a teen. It's that great a movie. So invest in it, rent it from borrow it from the library because it is there.
Yeah.
And just enjoy the wonderful gloriousness that is Jonah, a VeggieTales movie. You will laugh, you'll cry, you won't hurl, but you sure will remember this movie after you finish it. So now we're going to move on to The Miracle Maker, which is another animated movie that's done in a claymation style.
Yes.
And I think 2D.
Yeah, in between, and when it's the regular story, it stays claymation. And then when they are talking about a flashback, or if someone's having a dream or interpretation, it switches to a 2D or traditional style of animation.
Right. And it's a great way they chose to do this movie, where if you're very young, you can tell there's a difference, and it will spark the attention that you need to get from a child with that difference, because bright colors and changes and differences are what gets children to pay attention when you're watching it. And you actually saw this as a very young child, and this was the second biblical movie you saw after Where's God When I'm Scared. And it was such a memorable movie that to this day Rascal still remembers it. And we watched it a couple of weeks ago, and it's just as good now as it was then. And it convincingly portrays the life of Jesus and his miracle ministry when he was here on earth. And it very well documents without being losing the interest of younger viewers, but keeping the interest of older viewers. Right.
And it's also, like I said, the neat way they had told the story, because usually other movies will do it from a different point of view, like with Ben-Hur, make it slightly fictitious. Okay. And others will focus on like the disciples or someone else that was featured in the Bible, and then have him come in at different points. It's like, this is what happened as that story went on, this is what someone else's story went on. And here they decided to do just the whole story from the time he was born to the time of his crucifixion and resurrection.
Right.
And you don't really see a lot of movies like this
Not
nowadays.
anymore.
The recent one they've had was The Star, and was supposed to be the birth of Jesus, but told through the animals, which is an odd way to take it.
In a different way, in a creative way.
But
with
yeah,
some good voice actors like Stephen
so
Young.
it could be good. We haven't seen it as of yet,
Right.
but it could be good. But usually movies like this, they put a lot of time and effort into the story, make sure it stays true to the events, make sure it's entertaining,
Right.
Very good voice actors, very good animators, good writers for portraying the story and the dialogue presented, and it's just a collab of very talented people doing the story and letting kids, both kids and adults, learn about Jesus' life,
Right.
even whether no matter what place they are in Christianity. Yeah.
Right. And I'm glad you mentioned voice actors, because Jesus is voiced by Ralph Fiennes, who's a very huge actor. He's been in movies like Schindler's List. That's his biggest role to date. But he's been in a lot of other roles where your parents, if you're younger and listening to this podcast, your parents will definitely know who Ralph Fiennes is. He's a brilliant actor, brilliant British actor, who just really convincingly portrays the complexities of Jesus. He doesn't sound harsh. He has that the tone that makes you want to listen, care what he says. He delivers, as you said, the verses of the Bible and the lines with such care, and you can tell love that comes through his voice. So this is just an amazing testament to using animation to share a bigger message.
Right.
And what I really like about it, again, like Jonah, VeggieTales movie, and Ben-Hur, it's not the type of movie where adults may look at it and go, it's preachy, which there's nothing wrong with preachy. But when you're going for younger viewers, the goal is to entertain and get the message across. And again, you were very young when you saw this, and you understood the message. When I asked you questions, you clearly told me what it meant. So I know that this movie is successful in doing what it means to do, to entertain, to teach, and to share the values of the New Testament with people who are familiar with it, as you said, as well as new people who are new to the gospel.
Right.
Anything else you want to share?
The one thing I want to mention before we switch to the last mention, is that what I remember about the movie, I remember seeing it, but I told you that when we rewatched it, the only thing was parts of it I didn't remember, but I did remember the message of it. I remember mostly the ending, which is good or bad depending on how you look at it.
Right.
But I remember just when he returned, and they were saying, like, oh, he's not back, and then he was, and then when he made ascension to heaven, that he is everywhere. That's what I kind of mostly remembered. Mostly that last act of the film, which isn't bad, but maybe that just had more of an impact on me.
And that's the conclusion of the movie, and that's the message that's there. So it did exactly what it was supposed to do. So it's great you're sharing that, because it did exactly what it was supposed to.
And then as we watched it, you're like, okay, now I remember this part, and then it started coming back to me. But for just reminding you before we pre-watching it, was like, what? But I still remember the ending.
Now, if you have Amazon Prime or Amazon period, you can watch this on Amazon Prime for free if you're a Prime member, and if not, I think it's $3.99. But go onto Amazon and take a look at this movie, and you will see that it's worth the viewing. It's worth the $3.99, and you'll just be impressed by what was done. At least it's been at least 15 years since this movie was out. Longer than that. This movie's about, I think, 20 years old.
Yeah.
And still to this, 20 years later, you can watch it and see what was great about it. And you had seen it multiple times, really, when you were younger.
Okay.
I remember the first time because of events that happened, but you had seen it multiple times. And then we lost the movie somehow. I don't know what happened. And seeing it on Amazon again was just a treat, and brought back memories of me enjoying it with you originally. So, again, if you have Amazon Prime, give it a look. And the last movie the last animated biblical series we're going to mention is currently airing on CBN, as you mentioned, and it's called Superbug.
Yes. And I have heard of this show, but had never seen it. I just kind of seen it when you flip through the channels. And I was telling Mama about this show, and that sounds like an interesting concept. And I couldn't find it anywhere because I didn't know what the heck the show was called. And then finally it aired, and I saw the title, so I just looked for it on Amazon, just like the Miracle Maker. And she finally got to see what it was, because this was the first time me watching as well. I had just heard of it and saw like one episode they had aired last year. It was supposed to be for Passover. They had a show about Jesus' resurrection, and the show is about these two kids. They're supposed to be best friends, but I'm swear
like
they're brother and sister. So I think someone had to might have changed that last minute.
Right.
And a robot named Gizmo, and they have those little devices called Superbook. And whenever they need to learn a lesson, okay, let's face it, the boy needs to learn a lesson every episode.
Yeah.
They get sent into the book to learn something into a different events of the Bible. And what's really stand out about this show is that it doesn't just do the basic stories like, well, it does do like Daniel and Lion's Den and Moses, Adam and Eve.
Ten Commandments.
But it does stories that usually others stay away from because of the what takes place in the Bible as what we determine as violence and not suitable for children.
Or
like
controversial,
right. Like for the first episode, they do show Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, but before that, they show how Lucifer became the devil.
Right, and it was really well done.
Like,
Not only
what?
was the animation great, but it shows, as you said, the actual events that the Bible speaks about.
Right.
So it takes and animates it and depicts it. I was like, wow. Right. And it actually even shows the fallen angel, Lucifer, with two sets of wings. And if you read some of the Old Testament in some books, it will tell you about, seraphim and different angels that had two sets of wings. And there was the first time I had ever seen in a movie or animated series where the angels actually had two sets of wings. So you knew these people really were up on their biblical knowledge. And it was a nice change.
Right. And when they would show violence in there, like...
But it's not graphic,
right,
it's not bloody.
Because it's still for kids, so I was surprised they actually kept some of the more violent tones of the stories in, but didn't show it happening. It was inferred, or you got, like when they had David and Goliath.
Right.
David was more brave in this story than others, usually just a little kid and stuff. But there he's more... strong on God's faith, and he's braver, more adventurous, and they actually keep him the part we call Goliath's head, but they just don't show it.
They just show him raising the sword.
Yeah, and then you hear it. Yeah, so it's inferred, but it's not seen. So I was surprised multiple times when they even kept true to those events. And like you said, it happened, but most people, I think, are afraid to show certain things because of where they'll get in trouble by networks or censors because they wouldn't show that to kids.
Now, two great things I want to mention about the first season that we watch, and it's in which season?
I think it's on season 4 now. We just only have season 1 available on Amazon.
Right. As you said, there's a myriad of different stories, and in the first season, though, you also have 4 different stories that concern Jesus. 1, the Passover. 2, his Sermon on the Mount. 3, his crucifixion, and then his resurrection. So... if you want something special to watch for, this time, you got 4 stories, one after the other, that you can go on Amazon and watch and have a nice little, about an hour and a half range where you can just watch this like it's one little movie.
Right.
The second thing is what you were saying, how it kept to realism. And in no other animated series, or even hardly a live action, have I seen anyone attempt to depict the occurrences of what happens in the book of Revelation, no S. And they get graphic as they can without being frightening to children.
Right.
But they don't show this beautiful world. They show a wasteland. They show their interpretation of how Satan appears as this gigantic cobra. And again, that's their liberty with interpretation.
Right.
But to get the point across to the children, they do. And these 2 kids that you're talking about have been transported into this story because of something that he does that we won't destroy and do a spoiler. But they should have been transported into this story after what he did. It was pretty bad. And he learns consequences, dire consequences of our actions.
And
but it's a great
and
forgiveness, exactly. But it's a great episode. It's so well done, and it's like, wow, they really did this.
Yeah, no one's done that.
No.
And I mean, nobody. I've seen like PureFlix tries to do like an action movie version of that story, but where you see people living through that. But no, this was the first time I see it, especially for kids, to actually go for the end of the world story.
And I think another reason is such realism. If I'm not mistaken, is it 3D animation?
Yeah,
Yeah,
and it was made in 2013,
animation.
so it was actually pretty good.
Mm-hmm. And it just makes it more enjoyable when you see these fleshed out characters, these lush landscapes, and these areas that you've read about in the Bible or seen or heard about, and you see that they've taken time to go into detail and show what it would have looked like. And it's really detailed. It's not something thrown together and just generic.
Right.
You can see the dirt. You can see the grains of sand. You can see the definition in the clouds, and the mountains look palatial, and it's just great. It's really, really great.
And they even go as far as to almost repeat verse for verse of what's said in the Bible
when they do quote,
right, and the kids, they're getting the story, but it's not like a time travel series where they can change events. The events never change no matter what they do. They just happen to be part of it, and they learn about it, and the characters from the Bible do not kind of question, who are these kids? Why are they
Which
here?
Which is hilarious.
Yeah,
they have modern clothes, and they got a robot, and no one asks, what's that? Who's that?
They
What's
only did
wearing?
It one time where it said, he's going to know something's wrong. We're the same age and got the same clothes. And this is the only one time did they change clothes to that era's time period.
Right.
But every other time they got this stuff on and no one questions it.
Right. And I know that's the part you're supposed to get lost in the story, but it's still hilarious. But it's a super book. Is great. I'm so glad that you found it. I can't wait to watch. We're saving that 4-episode block to watch during this time, and I can't wait to see the other series. You can find it on CBN on cable and continue to watch them, because there's just a myriad of stories.
Yeah,
I think
and
there's
they're
13 in each season.
Yeah, it's actually increasing a little more because it's on season 3 or 4 right now, and they're doing way more stories than just the ones that are taught by kids. They're doing stories like I say, they did Damascus and of Saul.
Right,
They
Saul,
did
his conversion of Paul, and they did Jacob and Esau.
Right, they did Ruth and Esther, and just like I said, just lots of stories that aren't well known for kids outside the basic ones you get every time. They're actually almost going through every story of the Bible that can be taught to children.
Right, and it's great as a way to, if there are younger children in Sunday school, or if you're trying to find a way to supplement what you're learning, this series is a great way to do it, because it's kind of like you get a visual of what you're learning.
Right.
And then you can take your Bible and go along and see if the quotes are accurate for you, so you can learn and know at the same time. But it's just really great. And kudos to them for making this series. There's nothing out there like it. It's definitely one of a kind, and I can't wait to see the rest of the stories that each season brings.
Right. So hopefully Amazon will put the rest. Besides season 1, they'll have the others available to watch, because it's really interesting. You'll see they'll start to go to other places, and then the girl actually starts to learn lessons too, and possibly the robot, so it's not just him screwing up every episode and having to learn something every single time. But he is voiced by Sam Vincent, aka She's Owl, so maybe he's got to screw up every once in a while.
And for once I said, is that She's Owl? And you said, I think so. And it was like, yeah, I got one. I finally recognized somebody who I'm really not familiar with, like Josh Keaton and Stephen Young. But yes, see this and enjoy it. Look it up on your cable station, CBN, and just take a look at some of the stories and be amazed at the animation and the storytelling that is done with the series. So that wraps up the ones that we're going to mention. We'd like to add, if you like live action movies during this time, my favorite is The Ten Commandments, starring Charlton Heston.
Again.
We watch it every year. I've watched it every year since I was a little kid, and I mean like 6 or 7. I love this movie. I bought the special edition. It's just a wonderful story, the way it's told, the cinematics, the filming, and it was light years ahead of its time in a directorial style, but in the way that it was filmed. If you watch other movies from that time period, I think it was like 1960, if I'm not mistaken. If you see other movies during that time, like on the was it the Turner Classic Movies, or your grandpa watches them, and you'll see during that time it wasn't that live CinemaScope, which is what it was called.
Right.
It's when it was developed, and the colors were kind of flat, and it kind of looks like maybe that the colors were painted in on those other movies, but in this movie, The Ten Commandments, it was the first use of CinemaScope, and it's just beautiful, and all of the detail in the backdrops, in the sets, in the attention to detail, and all of the objects and things that are there. You can tell that I really love this movie. It's just a piece of art, and it's a classic that I'm sure a lot of you have probably seen already, but it's my favorite. If you haven't, take a look. And is there one you want to recommend before we go?
The only one I would probably recommend, again, like we did earlier, would be VeggieTales. Mm-hmm. And yes, it may seem like some of the stories from earlier are like, for little kids, but trust me, when you watch them, they're really funny. They even get humor for adults. Like, they have one where it talks about Gilligan's Island. Like, what kid's gonna know that at the time? And even the newer ones, to a certain point, they do have still some great ones. Like, they do It's a Wonderful Life and The Star of Christmas. And they just really do still some great work, even after switching to a more Saturday morning esque feel for the movies and specials. But yeah, I think that's still fun to watch if you want to laugh and still learn.
Yes, definitely. So, do you have some favorite movies you watched during this time? Passover, Resurrection Day, Easter, or whatever religious holiday that you observed during this time? Let us know in the comments and give us some more to take a look at and get to know if we're not familiar with them.
Sounds great. I'm Rascal Entertainment.
And I'm Mama Entertainment.
Have a toontastic day.
Peace, and enjoy your Passover, Easter, or Resurrection Day.
And reporters sitting flashing lights, trying to walk around, man, who the hell are you? What you wanna do? Well, man, it's on you. Man, it's on you. Hit her in my dreams, she was my queen. A castle in the mountaintops, rivers and streams. Plucking sunlight from the sky in my pocket, give it to you later on.